Okay, good evening. Welcome to Planning Committee. I'm Acting Mayor Barrie Ward. I'm going to be filling in for Mayor Lehman over the next 9 weeks while he's on his leave of absence. So it's kind of like expecting David Lee Roth, and you're getting Sammy Hagar tonight. We're still Van Halen though. I now call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Tonight's meeting is being held with members of the Planning Committee, members of the Executive Management Team, Deputy City Clerk, and the City Clerk in the Council chambers. Members of the senior leadership team and other staff are available to answer questions in person and via video conference. The Council chambers remain closed to the public until further notice. The first item on the agenda, well, we don't have a consent agenda tonight, so the first item is the public meetings. We have 2 public meetings this evening. Tonight's applications were submitted by the developers and deemed complete under the Planning Act to proceed with the public meetings. The first public meeting is to review an application for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submitted by MHBC Planning on behalf of Plaza Retail REIT for lands known municipally as 315 and 323 Mapleview Drive West in Ward 7. The second public meeting is to review an application for a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Innovative Planning Solutions on behalf of 2570974 Ontario Core Advisory Group for lands known municipally as 505, 511, 515, and 533 Yonge Street. Subject lands are legally described as Part Block C, lots 12, 38, 39, and 40, concession 13 on Plan 885, parts 1 to 4 on Plan 51R 19631, and parts 1 to 2 on Plan 51R 31208. Members of Planning Committee will be listening to the presentations and comments received during the public meetings, but will not be making comments or debating the item tonight. Members of Planning Committee will have an opportunity to provide comments when the staff report is considered by Planning Committee at a later date. As the purpose of the planning meeting is to provide the public with an opportunity to provide comments on the subject applications, the ward councillor will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and questions of clarification. This will allow them to ask questions on behalf of residents unable to attend the meeting. Other committee members, including myself, can ask questions of staff after the meeting. Questions will be noted by staff and the applicant, however, will not be responded to at this meeting and will be addressed in a staff report presented at a later date. Michelle Banfield, Director of Development Services, could you please confirm that notification was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act for the public meetings?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Ward, it was.
Okay, our first public meeting. Although registration to speak prior to the meeting was encouraged, if you have not yet registered and wish to speak, please email the clerk at cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 705-797-5353 and staff will send you the information required to participate. I will now call upon a representative of MHBC Planning to provide a presentation concerning an application for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submitted by MHBC Planning on behalf of Plaza Retail REIT for lands known municipally as 315 and 323 Mapleview Drive West.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Rocher, and I have a short presentation I'd like to provide to the committee. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's public meeting. My name is Catherine Rocher. I'm a planner with MHBC. We are the agent on behalf of the owner, Plaza Retail REIT, a leading retail property owner and developer focused in Eastern Canada. We are pleased to share some information on the proposed development on behalf of our client, Plaza Retail REIT. At the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to answer any other questions about the development proposal. Tonight's meeting focuses on our proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications that have been submitted to facilitate the site's redevelopment. The applications focus on introducing new commercial uses to the site, including commercial retail, restaurant uses, and a food store, in order to facilitate the comprehensive redevelopment of a commercial and employment plaza. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Wendat Nation, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We honor Indigenous history and culture and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. Before we begin, we would like to provide an overview of what we will be covering in our presentation. First, we will introduce the site in terms of its physical context, location, and surrounding land uses. Next, we will provide an overview of the site's policy context from both a provincial and a local planning perspective. Next, we will provide an overview of the proposal, including a summary of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. We will then provide an overview of the supporting technical studies that have been prepared.
Could I just
to
interrupt
support
just
this
for 1
application.
minute, see if we can get the sound turned
Following
up a
that,
bit?
we
It
welcome
seems-
any additional
Ms.
comments or
Rauscher?
questions members of the public may have.
Ms.
Sorry.
Rauscher?
Yes.
We just wait a second. We're having trouble, a little bit of trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if you can move, turn your mic up or if we can do it at this end, but nope, that's much better.
Okay. Hopefully that works.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's begin with an overview of the site. The site is made up of two lots, 315 and 323 Mapleview Drive West. The site has approximately 132 meters of frontage along Mapleview Drive West and is approximately 2.45 hectares. In terms of site contacts, the subject site is currently vacant. The site is well connected to the broader road network. Direct access is provided to Mapleview Drive West, which is identified as a major arterial roadway. Other major roads, such as Veterans Drive and Essa Road, are located to the west and east of the site, respectively. In terms of policy, land use on the subject site is governed by a number of policy documents at the provincial and local levels. At the provincial level, we have the PPS and the Growth Plan. These policy documents support the intensification of built-up areas, including redeveloping vacant sites in order to support employment growth while reducing the need to expand into non-urban areas. At the local level, the subject site is located within the built-up area and is designated general industrial under the City of Barrie's official plan. The subject site is zoned light industrial with special provision 367 under the city's comprehensive zoning bylaw 2009-141. Taking a deeper look at the city's official plan, the site is located in the city's industrial planning area, specifically the Highway 400 West employment area. These two maps shown here are Schedule A of the city's draft official plan and the current official plan showing land use designations. The site is designated as general industrial in the current official plan and employment area non-industrial in the draft official plan. The predominant use in the general industrial area is manufacturing, processing, servicing, storage of goods and raw materials, industrial warehousing, and similar uses. Commercial uses which serve the industrial area, such as a restaurant as part of a multi-tenant building, may be permitted. Commercial uses that are not accessory to industrial or employment uses are not permitted. The City of Barrie has been in the process of updating its official plan. City Council approved the draft official plan earlier this year. The updated official plan provides additional clarity for the urban structure to better plan for communities, certainty for investment, and aligned policy direction with a shared vision for Barrie's future. Looking at the city's zoning bylaw, the subject site is zoned light industrial with Special Provision 367. Special Provision 367 permits the use of automotive sales. A range of industrial uses and accessory commercial uses are permitted in the light industrial zone. However, personal service stores and retail stores, including food stores and supermarkets, are not currently permitted. Apart from the proposed uses on the site, the proposal complies with existing zoning requirements in terms of required lot area, lot frontage, front, side, and rear yards, lot coverage, maximum building height, and landscape requirements, as well as parking. The proposed official plan amendment will retain the existing general industrial designation and will add new site-specific policy to permit additional commercial uses on the subject lands. The existing general industrial designation policies that apply to the subject lands are proposed to be amended by adding commercial uses, including a retail store and a personal service store, and food store and supermarket as permitted uses on the subject lands. The proposed official plan amendment also involves modifying the official plan to identify the subject lands as a defined policy area. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment will retain the existing zoning and will add a new special provision to accommodate the proposed development. The new special provision will include the following: adding retail store, personal service store, food store, and supermarket, as well as standalone restaurant as permitted uses on the subject lands. The official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications have been submitted concurrently. A site plan application will be submitted at a later date to facilitate the development of the site. Our client is proposing to comprehensively redevelop a site into a mixed commercial and employment plaza which supports commercial and employment uses. The proposed mixed commercial and employment development contains 3 building footprints which will support retail, restaurants, and food stores. Shown here is the proposed building layout. Shown here is Building A, a one-story multi-tenant commercial retail building with approximately 418 square meters. Shown here is Building B, a one-story multi-tenant building featuring a restaurant with a drive-through, proposed to be 371 square meters. Shown here is Building C, a one-story multi-tenant building including a food store and retail store, proposed to be 5,000 square meters. Shown in green is an easement across the property for an existing 200-millimeter diameter water main. The existing municipal water supply network will not be affected by the proposed development and can sufficiently service the site. With this amendment, the technical studies shown here have been submitted in support of the applications. These studies are being reviewed by the city and various commenting agencies. Additional studies required as part of the corresponding site plan application will be submitted at the appropriate time. This concludes our presentation. We thank you for taking the time to listen. We would be happy to answer any questions or take any comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rauscher. I guess the first thing to do is to we now call upon Michelle Banfield, Director of Development Services, to provide an update on the status of the application.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Ward and members of Planning Committee. Thank you for the introduction. The planning staff are currently completing the technical review process associated with this application. There was a neighborhood meeting held back in January with about 10 members of the public in attendance, providing feedback related to the placement of the signalized intersection at the subject site and its potential impact on traffic flow, seeking clarification regarding timing of the proposed project and if there's any residential uses that are going to be proposed. So staff are doing the technical review right now with our internal and external agencies. In this case, it also includes the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. So the primary planning and land use matters being considered include compatibility with the surrounding land uses, impacts on traffic and parking, the interface at Mapleview Drive, the impact of the intersection, the signalized intersection, ensuring that the proposed built form and site layout and overall design contribute to an active streetscape and enhance Mapleview Drive West, confirmation that the development can be serviced, and just ensuring that the development meets all the operational standards of the city. So all of the comments that we've received so far, as well as whatever we hear this evening, and including the technical application comments, will be put together in a planning staff report to be brought back to council, potentially either the later part of 2022 or the early part of 2023, depending on how quickly some of these things can be responded to. A site plan control would be required afterwards, and that is something that is delegated to staff. So that concludes what I have to say this evening. Thanks so much for your attention. And as always, all of the submission materials, key dates, everything associated with this application are available on the city's proposed development webpage. This is in Ward 7, and you can also contact Logan Jeffermans directly, and he's the file manager. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Banfield. Ms. Cook, do we have anybody registered to speak at the meeting?
No, Deputy Mayor Ward, we have no one registered to speak.
And there's nobody online? Okay. Then I'll call upon the ward councillor, Gary Harvey, for Ward 7. Do you have any questions for clarification?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. No, I don't have any questions. This applicant's actually been very engaging very early on in the process. So any questions that arose have been answered prior to tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. If anybody would like to submit written comments, you are asked to email Logan Jeffermans, the planner in the city's development services department, and his email is logan.jeffermans, Juffermans @barrie.ca. We'll now hold the second public meeting. If members of the public have not yet registered and wish to speak, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 705-797-5353 and staff will send you the information required to participate. I will now call upon a representative of Innovative Planning Solutions to provide the presentation concerning an application for the zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Innovative Planning Solutions on behalf of 2570974 Ontario Core Advisory Group for land zone municipality as 505, 511, 515, and 533 Yonge Street. The subject lands are legally described as Part Block C, lots 12, 38, 39, and 40, concession 13 on Plan 885, parts 1 to 4 on plans 51R, 19631 and parts 1 and 2 on plan 51R 31208. Representative of Innovative Planning Solutions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward, and good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here. Hopefully you can see that. Thank you for joining me. My name is Kyle Galvin, and I'm a senior planner and registered professional planner at Innovative Planning Solutions here in Barrie, representing the owner of the lands located at 505 to 533 Yonge Street. This evening, I will be introducing you to a development concept for a proposed application for a zoning bylaw amendment, and welcome any questions and feedback you may have on the proposal. The subject site is located in the Painswick North planning area of Barrie along Yonge Street between the major intersections of Yonge Street and Big Bay Point Road to the south and Yonge and Little Avenue to the north. The subject lands are highlighted in red in this image. The total site area of the property is approximately 2.68 hectares or 26,800 square meters, with approximately 167 meters of frontage along Yonge Street, and is considered an arterial road. Of the 2.68 hectares, approximately 1.6 hectares are considered developable due to the presence of hazard lands and environmental protection areas associated with Lovers Creek. The subject lands currently hold a 2-story medical building and 3 detached houses with accessory buildings. Trees and vegetation can be found along the eastern portion of the site, within and around the EP lands to the rear of the site. Within the EP lands is Lovers Creek and woodlands. The topography of the site is relatively flat along Yonge Street. However, it slopes down towards the east towards Lovers Creek. This slide shows the property in relation to the greater context. As shown, the property falls in between the 2 primary intensification nodes along Yonge Street intensification corridor. In this area, you can see Lovers Creek, which runs north-south adjacent to the rear of the property. There are residential neighborhoods located in the vicinity. However, they are not directly adjacent to the site and generally do not front Yonge Street directly. The property is well served by public amenities with parks, schools, and commercial areas close by, transit along Yonge Street, as well as the Barrie South GO station located close by, as seen in the bottom right side of this image. This view shows a more detailed view of the site and its neighbors. To the north are 2 commercial buildings containing a veterinary clinic and a restaurant, a low-density residential subdivision, and at the corner of Yonge Street and McMillan Crescent is a future 4-story residential apartment building containing 67 units. To the east, on the opposite side of Lovers Creek, is a medium-density townhouse development and a low-density residential neighborhood containing a mix of 1- and 2-story dwelling units. This area is buffered by a Lovers Creek ravine. To the south is D'Ambroso Park, Lovers Creek ravine, and associated wooded area, and a cluster of commercial uses at the intersection of Yonge Street and Big Bay Point Road. To the west, across Yonge Street, is a townhouse development and 4-story apartment building. This slide illustrates the land use designation that currently applies to the subject lands. The subject lands are designated residential and environmental protection in the city's official plan. The majority of the lands surrounding the subject site are also designated residential, with pockets of open space, the environmental protection area associated with Lovers Creek, as well as general commercial fronting Yonge Street close to the intensification nodes. As noted earlier, the property is located along the Yonge Street primary intensification corridor. This rents a variety of medium and high density residential, commercial, and institutional uses within the same building, with active uses located at the ground. In terms of the existing zoning on the site today, in brown is the RM2 zone, which is the residential multiple dwelling second density zone. In light yellow is the R1 zone, which is the residential single detached dwelling first density zone. And in green is the environmental protection area zone. This image shows the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw. It is a bit technical as there are a number of existing zones with special provisions on the site. However, the proposal is to rezone the lands that are currently RM2 and R1, the brown and yellow areas on the previous slide, to the residential apartment dwelling second density zone and leave the environmental protection zones as they are. No change to the environmental protected areas. This slide shows the proposed site plan. The proposal includes 4 residential buildings ranging in height from 8 to 12 stories. As a whole, the proposal will result in a total gross floor area of approximately 52,289 square meters, comprised of 51,213 square meters of residential and 1,076 square meters of retail or commercial GFA. Building 1 is an 8-story condominium building located at the northwest corner of the site with frontage onto Yonge Street. Building 2 is a 10-story market rental residential building with commercial and retail uses at grade, also fronting onto Yonge Street. Building 3 is another 8-story condominium building and is located at the southwest corner of the site, again with frontage onto Yonge Street. Building 4 is the tallest of the proposed buildings, located internally towards the rear of the site, and is a 12-story condominium building. Together, these 4 buildings provide a total of 400 residential units, with a proposed density for the property at approximately 243 units per hectare. The proposal will also provide approximately 8,194 square meters of total amenity space located throughout the development, and include a central courtyard amenity area, a large amenity area at the rear of the property overlooking Lovers Creek, which is connected by a fully looped walkway. There are also indoor amenity spaces provided as well as balconies. All buildings within the development will be provided vehicular access through a single condominium road. That will access Yonge Street on either side of building 2. In terms of parking, 2 levels of underground parking are provided for residents, with some surface level parking available. A total of 469 parking spaces will be provided, comprising of 447 residential parking spaces and 22 parking spaces for commercial. And this meets the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw. The proposal is anticipated to be phased, with phases to be determined as the project progresses. Although not technically applicable yet to the property, the new official plan designates the property as medium density. This designation encourages mixed-use residential and retail developments in buildings in a range of 6 to 12 stories, with a density in a range of 125 to 300 units per hectare. The proposed development fits right within this framework, with the proposed density of approximately 243 units per hectare. This image shows a conceptual render of the proposed buildings looking southeast at the subject site. The massing and siding of the proposed buildings has been carefully considered and have been designed with the principles of good urban design. Buildings have been placed along Yonge Street frontage in order to frame the street, with active uses located on the ground floor to help animate the public realm. Building 2 in the middle includes a step back at the upper stories in accordance with the city's annular plan provisions, which helps to reduce the visual and physical impact of the built form on the street. Landscaping, including street trees, have also been included along the frontage of the proposal. This image shows a conceptual rendering of the central amenity space provided. In addition, where building 4 is proposed a bit taller at 12 stories, the building is sited internally towards the rear of the site where there's a lower grade. This helps to support the reduced visual and physical impact to the Yonge Street streetscape. The geodetic height of the 12-story building is only slightly taller than the 10-story building due to the change in grade. Sufficient separation distances are provided between the buildings to maintain privacy, support access to light, and provide sky views. This slide depicts the reports and studies and drawings that were submitted to the study along with our application. The studies are currently under review, and we hope to have comments back from the city shortly after this meeting. We look forward to working with the city through any technical and planning related concerns. I won't take you through all of the studies, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions about them if anything comes up. In conclusion, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is being sought to permit the proposed development, which will assist the city of Barrie in achieving its targets for population growth, new housing units, jobs, and employment. The proposal represents an opportunity to provide for redevelopment and intensification along the Yonge Street intensification corridor. It seeks to deliver attainable housing uses, including purpose-built market rental, to the City of Barrie housing market. It is in a location where growth and development is anticipated and encouraged by the in-force and new official plan on underutilized lands with existing infrastructure and transit. The proposed development would serve to revitalize the area, supporting future economic growth and encouraging other development. Thank you for your time. I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. I'll now call upon Michelle Banfield, Director of Development Services, to provide an update on the status of the application.
I was really excited. I stood up there even a bit early. So good evening and thank you again for the introduction. I'm just going to hit it off on the head because we're going to be hearing a bit about reminders about the new official plan, and both planning consultants did it today, and I probably should have addressed it the last time. So the new official plan, while adopted, is not approved. So you're going to hear from people that are either way. It has, I think the word tonight was technically not, it's not technically, it's not in effect. So we are going to hear from people that are going to say, you know, the new OP says this. We're going to see some applications that actually got their application in because they knew what the new OP was going to be coming in. So ultimately it has no effect. You know, some of the applications that are going to say that they are going to conform to the new OP, that's great, but there's going to be some applications that might not, and that still doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't good applications or shouldn't go forward. But just a reminder that it's adopted, yes, not approved. Well, you'll be the second to know as soon as we know when it's approved, but it really doesn't have impacts on the stuff that you're hearing from now. And even there's still going to be some opportunities up until the time the ministry makes their decision and approves it. Right up until that kind of the day before, applications that are deemed complete are still going to be able to be processed under the existing official plan. Okay. Questions, of course, happy to answer any of them. So in this case, much like the previous one, planning staff are just doing the technical review associated with this application. And a neighborhood meeting was held in September of 2021. About 30 members of the public attended. Certainly some of the comments that we heard resulted around traffic, any increase in traffic, any negative impacts on the traffic operations. Wanted to make sure that the parking standards and parking ratios would be adequate so as to not cause spillover parking issues in the neighborhood. Taking a look at the build height and the potential impacts on the surrounding land uses. Residents are always interested, as are we, in protecting the environmentally sensitive areas. Of course, any property that would go through a development application like this with environmentally protected land, as a condition of those approvals, that land gets dedicated to the city. As I said, to protect them in perpetuity. Questions are raised about the proposed density, whether it's appropriate. Residents also just asked a bit about the mix of affordable and at market rent, and then just also preserving as many trees as possible. So staff are doing the technical review, which includes our internal and external agencies. In this case, it's the Conservation Authority, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. And we are taking a look at all of the usual things as it relates to land use compatibility with the surrounding land uses, shadowing, stepping provisions, building setbacks, landscape buffers, fencing, obviously ensuring that the environmentally sensitive lands are protected and dedicated to the city, ensuring that the built form and the layout works and won't impact Yonge Street negatively. Just as always, ensuring that the land and resources are being used to the greatest extent possible, connectivity between the subject lands and what's going on in the area. Preservation of private and shared vegetation. Again, we're making sure that the traffic and parking is appropriate. And again, looking at the density as it relates to the entire site. So again, we're looking at late 2022 or possibly early 2023 to have the staff report. As always, anything that we hear either at the neighborhood meeting through this technical review process, whatever we hear tonight would be included and addressed in the planning staff report. All of the submission materials, key dates, everything associated with the application are available online on the city's web page under Ward 8, and the file manager is Andrew Gamero, and he can be contacted directly. So that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banfield. We have one registered speaker for tonight's public meeting. Once your name has been called, staff will provide the speaker the ability to unmute. Click on the unmute button to speak or press number 6 if you are calling in by phone, and begin by stating your first and last name and your address for the record, and then proceed with your comments. I will now invite Greg Stevenson to provide comments.
Okay, hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Can't remember who you said you might be, Van Halen or something like that. That's quite funny. The Planning Committee, councillors, and everyone on the phone this evening. So yeah, my name is Greg Stevenson. I'm at 5 Tomlin Court, and I will be brief. And Ms. Banfield, I think, covered a lot regarding, you know, my thoughts around development and concerns, and parking is my main issue, and it's just spill out parking and preventing that issue around the streets and communities surrounding the property. So I just wanted to bring up this for everybody to think about, and just to highlight this for the group. I understand now there's 447, I think, residential spots, and then 22 retail for a total of 469. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the residential spots, will they be assigned so that they're actually used only for the residents, like by their number, so that they can count on having them when they need them?
And Mr. Stevenson, we don't allow back and forth, but that question will be answered in the staff report.
Okay, so I'll just share my questions, and then thank you very much. And so the other thought too is the assignment of these residential spots in terms of handicap spots, and then visitor spots assigned for residents. And then the other thing is, with those 22 retail commercial, how was that number determined? Is this sufficient? If we think about customers coming and going, you think about people working there. So I just want to see more, you know, of the details around that. And then finally, a dedicated space for snow. So where's the snow going to go in the wintertime, and making sure that the visitor spots or the parking spots are taken up from that. So those general thoughts here. And then the other thing for the city, I'm aware of the standard of, you know, one parking spot per house. I have verbalized before that, you know, statistics are a bit higher than that for Barrie specifically, 1.5. And so it could be, for such a large development, you know, you could think of with that standard up to 600 family household cars that may need to be parked. And I recognize people are saying there's a less dependence on cars. Well, the statistics aren't showing that yet. And I know if that's what you're driving for, that's not yet happening. So the reality is, what will it be? And I'm wondering if the city could do a parking study, if it's not planned already, and maybe even a survey across this Yonge Street corridor, so people can comment on the current situation, because we've heard the stories about challenges even in a townhouse where you have a garage and a single driveway, and people not being able to park. You hear other developments, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it. It's up by the GO train. It's the station park condos or whatever. The visitor parking spots actually are being sold now to residents because they don't have enough parking. So there's no visitor parking because there's such a demand to find a car, or a place to put their car. They actually have to sell them, and that's an extra cost for the residents. And you know, money is harder and harder to find these days when you're buying property. So I just want to bring that up, and that's it. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson, and staff has been taking notes. I'll now call upon the Ward 8 Councillor, Jim Harris. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. I do. Thank you. Through you, maybe to start with.
Hey, I should have asked, sorry, Jim.
Sorry.
Is there anybody online? I forgot to ask if anybody else was online.
No, Deputy Mayor Ward, there's no further speakers.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. To Mr. Galvin, thank you for the presentation. And Mr. Stevenson raised one point. I think it may be helpful, given that he mentioned about the snow storage area. And I do see one on the slide, page 5. So with that noted, have there been changes to this design from what was presented to the neighborhood meeting? And if so, if you could maybe highlight those changes, maybe the snow removal or snow storage area is one of those.
Absolutely, yes. So you're right. There's actually 2 storage areas now. There's one at the north end of the site, just kind of at the very edge of the property, adjacent to some at surface parking. And then there is a relatively large snow storage area right beside the ramp that's going to go down to access the underground parking. So in terms of changes from the neighborhood meeting, we tried to take as many of the comments that we got into consideration. We looked at the amenity spaces particularly, and kind of reconfigured those so that they worked a little bit better than what they had been before. And then we looked at the stepping of the buildings and how to place the buildings to mitigate any height or impacts onto the streetscape. But you're right, there is snow storage being planned for the site, and it is designed by our landscape architect, and it's looked at pretty closely.
Okay, thank you. And the site has some really interesting features, and you noted them in the presentation as well, and one of which is the environmentally protected area that borders the property really on two sides, the south and I guess it would be the east. Can you, and residents have asked, and I do have some questions, thank you for your indulgence, from residents who forwarded them to me, so I want to make sure I ask them on their behalf. So the environmental protection and the proximity to Lovers Creek, and certainly with the number of trees that are bordering that area, can you speak a bit to the plans to manage the potential impact on the slope that goes to the creek and the environmental concerns in the area with the project?
Absolutely. So as I noted, the environmental protection areas that are currently zoned aren't going to change. We're not asking to develop in any way in those areas. So they'll stay protected, and they won't be going anywhere. In terms of kind of the way that the site will be developed, we have a great landscape architect who has gone through and done a tree inventory to see exactly which trees will need to be removed, and every effort has been made to conserve every single tree that we can. And those trees that do need to be removed will be compensated for, either by planting on site or cash in lieu, and will be made up for in other areas. And then in terms of the slope, we have a great engineer, Tatum Engineering. It's a local Barrie engineering firm who has taken a look at the slope stability, and I'm no engineer, so I can't really get into any technical aspects of it, but they're definitely making sure that the site is safe and that there won't be any erosion or any impacts on the Lovers Creek ravine. There's also been an environmental impact study submitted, so it's all detailed in there, and we look forward to getting comments back on those reports, hopefully soon.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Stevenson mentioned parking. I know he's done a lot of personal research into parking. Just curious, and I understand the standards and the words that were used to describe the current plan for parking were meets the current standard and being adequate. And we've seen with some other developments where they decided to go a little bit beyond what's adequate or pardon me, what meets the standard. Was there any thought or calculation in the possibility of the benefit of exceeding the standard required for parking?
Well, I mean, the parking is located underground, so it is quite expensive to make. So we've made every effort to meet the zoning bylaw ratios that are required. So that was kind of our main goal of the parking. We did do a traffic impact study that was included with the submission, and is also being reviewed. And it's also available online for anybody to look at. It's a technical engineering document. Again, we have so I'm not really able to speak to any of the technical aspects, but the results of the study were that the parking ratio that is proposed is going to be sufficient for the users. The other aspect is that it is located on the transit corridor, and we want to encourage people to use that transit. So I think by including additional parking, it's kind of doing the opposite of encouraging people to use the transit. So it's kind of like if there aren't parking spaces, people can't park there, so they'll have to take transit. It's a bit of a planning theory, but at this point, we're really trying to get people onto the transit line over to the GO station, which is pretty close. And the parking ratios that are in the zoning bylaw are pretty, I think, pretty generous for the site. So
yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, thank you. I was thinking maybe we not have them not go to the GO, but go to the Barrie Transit and work in Barrie would be ideal, but that's a different subject. But thank you for the answer.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe with the on the theme of the cars and traffic, and if just maybe, and this might be for Miss Banfield, you know, when the neighborhood meeting was held and the residents talked about D'Ambrosio not having a street light, and then the potential of how these two entrances fit or don't fit with D'Ambrosio. Is there any early indications on, that's obviously on the plan to look at, and just for residents who have asked how that's being considered? Maybe Ms. Banfield, if that was clear, sorry.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris, I'm going to have to look into that, to be honest, because this is the first that that was flagged to me. So we can absolutely take that offline, and then you can share it with your constituents.
Thank you. That's fine. And I just I think those are the main ones. I just thank you, Mr. Galvin and Ms. Banfield. Look forward to watching this progress and seeing what adjustments can be made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one last check, Ms. Cook. Is anybody else registered to speak?
No, Mayor Lehman. Or Mayor Lehman. I know I'm going to do this a few times.
Okay,
No, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for your comments. If anyone has any further written comments, you are asked to submit them to Andrew Gamero, planner in the Development Services Department, at andrew.gamero, Gameiro, at barrie.ca. That concludes the public meeting portion. The only other thing left on the agenda is if anybody has any inquiries of staff, planning inquiries, I'll call upon Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Ms. Banfield. I had a couple of questions, and the development conversation triggered some where I've had complaints in my ward, but they're specific to existing developments, and they're at that transition point between development completing and then changing hands to operator owner. And the one question from the individual that came to mind, which is one that I'm dealing with, is the visitor parking and the sales of visitor parking. And I didn't know if you could share with me whether or not there are any controls when we establish, or when a developer comes forward and talks a bit about parking and ratios to, be it special needs or visitor parking or tenant parking, because my understanding is there's not, and it's really in the hands of a condo board. And so that's really a complaint kind of resolution that needs to go between a tenant or renter owner to the condo board or operator. Is that correct? Or is there anything within our policies through the development phase where we could control for that to be a minimum ongoing?
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kungle. So the visitor parking on these communal sites are definitely something that's been flagged. And so we do have them identified in the site plan. And then they're obviously, when they do the site plan check, to make sure they're flagged. Unfortunately, we don't really have controls beyond that. If the condo board does rent out those spaces or sell them, I do know that people do have some, they have to have those follow-up conversations at the condo board.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question through you, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Sure.
My other one comes down to servicing. And so when we talk about servicing, I also have another area where the development went through and they chose to service garbage and recycling privately. With changing costs, they've revisited that, and members of a condo board are interested to see if they could ever change that arrangement hypothetically and have a switch over to city services. For that situation, it's not even possible because of the design of the development, where we couldn't get trucks actually to be able to access and back out. Are we seeing more of those situations where there's an interest in actually doing services privately? And would we ever consider, or is there a forewarning to say, your design can never support the way it is any transition in the future to city services because we just can't safely get our fleet in and out? Is that part of the conversation? So there's an awareness that can maybe track through the development and the transition of what they can expect later around what's on the table and what's not possible?
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kungle. So I don't take care of garbage collection, but I can tell you just from the conversations that we have had. So, first and foremost, operations is always ready, willing, and able to service any development. What happens is that sometimes you're right, the street's too narrow, they don't have a turning radius, and so they say we can't service your development. And so then at that point, the applicant has a choice of either making the change to their site plan to allow the trucks to access it, or to do a private service. We have had some instances where people have started with a private service, and then the condo board has come back and said, can we get public collection? And again, our team is always, they just can't get it necessarily door to door. So we've even had it where our operations have said, yeah, if everybody brings their garbage to the curb, we 100% will collect it. Not everybody wants to do that, right? And then it goes back and forth. So it is a bit of a challenge. And it is definitely a conversation that we have, kind of throughout the planning process with not only the developer, but also our internal team. But as I said, they fundamentally are always willing to do it. It's just a matter of if the site design allows for it. But we have even had cases where they've wanted to retrofit. And again, our team is happy to do it. They just physically can't get trucks down there. So they're saying, if you do this, we can do it. But that's kind of where we're at with that.
Okay, thank you. I have one final question. And this is if I may use the last presentation as an example, but it's not a question to the presenter specifically, but when we have developments like that one where we've got an environmentally protected area that does boundary, so that one was on the east and south. And I know there's all the studies that have been submitted and that you're in the process of reviewing them, but probably for my own learning, is there anything about bounding to an EP area when there's that much of it and that design is kind of abutting the pathway of an EP area where there's certain setbacks or standards that are in our planning policies that just kind of protect a boundary? So I think about conversations like tree preservation and excavation, which can do most damage depending on the approach. So do we take a setback or a distance that aligns to or applies to EP areas for any development? Or does it just come through the site plan process?
Ms. Banfield.
through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kungle. So just two things in there. So one, the tree piece, when you're actually talking about individual trees, there actually is a city standard that talks about how far you have to be from the drip line and that sort of thing. So that is a city standard for individual trees. From an EP perspective, what we always kind of say is the line isn't the line. So it works. The mapping that we do is obviously at a very high level. And when we have a development application, the idea is to ground truth that. So that's done through their consultants, through the Conservation Authority. The line is drawn, it's usually staked on site, literally with people walking and hitting sticks into the ground. And then it's usually the line plus. And so depending on what the feature is, that could be the line plus 5 meters, or it could be the line plus 10 meters. In the case of a slope, you're obviously not going to want to build right up to the line because there's not going to be that stability. So it depends on the feature. And that is usually done through, again, through the ground truthing, working through the environmental work with that not only their consultant does, but the Conservation Authority. And then, as I said, that buffer piece usually gets incorporated into the EP. And then the rest is what's called the development limits. So you'll hear us talk about applications, land use type applications. We talk about identifying the development limits, and that is the line, whatever it is, plus, and then we know what we can zone and what we can develop, because you obviously can't develop if there's a feature there, you're going to need some of a bit of a distance. You can't just put a house right there. So that's what it is, the line plus. That all gets worked out, not only through the land use, but then it gets even more detailed at site plan stage.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Any other inquiries from council? Seeing none, that completes the planning committee agenda this evening. The next general committee meeting will be held on Monday, April 4th, and the next council meeting will be held on Monday, April 11th. Planning committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.